notice at the end when I was writing out the restitution agreement, I was done with it, but I just let them keep talking? Did you notice that? That is a clear example of what I mean when the energy of communication is flowing back and forth between victim and offender. I'm very reluctant to interfere with that. Over the decades of doing this in many programs, facilitators have realized some of the most touching moments in a mediation is when the mediator's not saying anything. They're just, you're down here writing the agreement, and they're talking to each other. And I didn't say, okay, I've got the agreement signed. Let's, I could have said, if I was approaching it like a business person or like, just in a rush, I wouldn't have let that happen. I would say, okay, I'm all done. Here's the agreement. That's a beautiful way of having people leave with a greater sense of, this was really helpful. Victim-offender mediation and dialogue doesn't fix everything. People still have some, bad feelings. It just humanizes it more. It makes it easier to live with. Brings some of the deeper feelings to a better place. Now, before I ask questions about this, I also want to point something out again that we talked about a few moments ago. In many, many cases, especially when you meet with the victim individually, you're going to hear much more anger or anxiety or, just more like that. And you might hear that from the offender. The offender's upset too. They feel it wasn't just me, it was other people. Totally understandable. It's like, again, when I'm with my Israeli and Palestinian friends in the Mideast. If I talk to just my Palestinian friends, they're going to be, they're going to be much more judgmental, much more angry about all of the historical trauma they've experienced. And if I'm talking just with my Israeli friends, they too. There is something I've witnessed over the years, and I wish there was a valid research tool to measure this. And this is totally in the energy realm. There is something dramatically different when you bring angry people together. They're sitting face to face. That shifts the energy. They typically, not always, but most of the time, it's harder to be angry directly at the person face to face than it is talking about the person to your friend. That's true in any kind of conflicts with parents or community people or families. The human encounter is supremely important. For years, I wish there was a valid piece of equipment that measured energy before people, before they even get in the pre-conference session, to measure energy after the pre-conference, to measure it in the few moments before the facilitation. People are always nervous before then. And then to measure it after it. There actually is a tool called Kirlian photography. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it does measure energy. My wife uses it, and some others, but it's not acceptable in the research community yet. I hope there will someday be, and there probably will be, a valid tool that's very accepted. But there is an incredible energetic shift. So yeah, there's anger, but if you don't provide a safe place to just listen to people's anger and being upset, if you don't provide that in the pre-conference settings, it's going to come out more in the session. And I can almost guarantee you, if you do not do pre-conference sessions, or if you do them just in a very quick business-like way, I would bet money it'll come out in the conference session, because it's just going to explode. So in terms of, we need to take a break soon, but before we take a break, questions that you have about what you saw. it is better to allow the victim to keep expressing, to let that energy come. And only, I would ask questions when she's done, then ask the offender, could you respond to that? But as a general principle, the natural release of the energy that we carry of conflict or even trauma, that needs to come out without interruption, without diagnosis. It just needs to come out. And now realize, there's many, many trainers who would totally disagree with most of what I'm telling you today and sharing with you. I'm not saying my way is the only way. No. There's different ways of doing it. This is what I've learned through my research and practice and from other cultures. But, other trainers would respond to that very differently. Many trainers would say, oh yes, interrupt the victim. Have the offender respond to that question. Well, it's just not been my experience. Excellent question again. Different mediators, facilitators in Europe and America would do this differently. Precisely because victims receive so little attention in our criminal justice systems. I defer to the victim. But I also ask them in the pre-conference session. I'll say something like, we oftentimes have people like yourself who have been victimized speak first because you receive so little attention. Do you feel comfortable with that? Or would you rather have the offender begin? I would say it like that. There are some programs in different countries that would always begin with the offender. I don't feel as comfortable with that because our systems of justice are totally offender-focused. What I call a trail 'em, nail 'em, jail 'em kind of mentality. Offenders, next case. And people who have been victimized are not given much attention. And restorative justice begins with the reality that people and families have been victimized. So it's out of respect that I begin with the victim, if they feel okay. But very clearly, hear me, if the victim says, no, I really would rather prefer the offender to begin, that's what we'll do. Now another approach one of my colleagues does, which is fine too, they'll simply ask, who would like to begin? When you begin the facilitation, after a few opening comments, the facilitator would say, which one of you would like to begin talking about the impact of the crime? That's quite nice too. But if I err, I will intentionally err in the direction of showing more deference and respect to the person victimized. It's like if I err in training or facilitation, I will err in the direction of forgetting something, which I have already done multiple times, including in the video. I'd rather err in the direction of being present with people in a way people feel comfortable and relaxed. We all err. Doesn't matter if you've been doing this for 20, 30 years or 2 years. We all make mistakes. We're humans. Don't be hard on yourself. Be aware of it. Try not to. None of us want to make mistakes. But the real power of this is not in the technique. It is in our presence, the energy of our presence, the energy of our spirit. What people are feeling and sensing. Do they feel comfortable and respected? All of which, from my understanding, are values which are deeply rooted in your culture and many other cultures. And just because I've traveled a lot and been in many cultures, I do not pretend in any way to be an expert on other cultures. No. The more I have been honored to be asked into other cultures and countries, the more I've learned. I'm asked to come in, I'm asked to come to Taiwan to help you, Taiwan. And I'm learning tremendous stuff from the way you're doing things differently.